So I wanted to start off really by touching on the other half of the title about trade wars, because I think the trade wars are a particularly relevant issue for the tech sector, precisely because the tech sector has been a major way that the value has flown from particularly Asia to the West, and particularly the US. So this has been, sort of laptop production, chip production, and so on. This has been actually an important motor supporting the US economy, and the way, in fact, that the US has tied Asian powers into US hegemony while trying to keep them in their place. And this is the reason why the US put so much effort into, first of all, trying to prevent Huawei, a Chinese company, from developing its own 5G, which they did develop it, and that was supposed to be impossible, but then they managed to do it. And also, this is the reason why they have such panic over the DeepSeek, as Kieran talked about, because this is, again, China showing that, well, we're not just going to be the junior partner who's just supplying the raw materials, doing the work of assembling things, but not being able to produce them ourselves. So this is a really important factor in the trade wars, and kind of introduces, I think, the unifying theme of what I want to say, which is fear. But I think that, there is the reaction to both Huawei and DeepSeek in the West is quite remarkably panicked. And this, of course, then this is also the case with an awful lot of discourse about AI. So if you're in an organization, what you are being told by the tech companies is you have to be afraid of being left behind. You might not see a business reason to adopt AI, but you will be left behind if you don't do it, if you don't get it right. So you've got to do it. And this, of course, is what we're being told as individuals, that if we don't grasp the opportunities of AI, then we will lose our jobs and we will be left behind. So again, it's kind of using fear of what AI will do, as if none of us have any control over it, to argue that we should take it up. So I wanted to talk a bit about this major argument that AI will take our jobs. And obviously, I think Kieran's introduced a very useful note of skepticism about that. But despite the skepticism, I don't think that we can be complacent that organizations are just not going to bother with this, because certainly it is still being sold to organizations being, you have to do this. And we are still being told, I was in, because I work in tech as the day job, and I was in a seminar on Friday where we were told authoritatively that AI can do 30% of work tasks in basically any kind of standard office type environment. And that's we as IT managers, that's what we should be aiming to do. So that's quite a lot of work. That's quite a lot of jobs. A survey a few years ago estimated that 47% of US jobs would potentially be lost to AI. So part of this is, I'm sure, overblown, but I don't think we can just kind of dismiss all of it. And there's some arguments that actually it's not really happening, that there's more jobs are being lost in manufacturing to kind of lean production methods than to AI. So there's still debate about this, but I think there is, we still need to take it seriously. Of course, the major argument that's put against that is that, well, okay, some jobs will be lost to AI. So if you're a designer, maybe this is a bit of a problem for you, but you can go do something else because AI will create jobs elsewhere. So this is indeed been a pattern. So industrial revolution and so on. People are driven off the land, but they got jobs in factories. And there's a kind of an air sometimes in the way that this is discussed that's like, okay, that's all fine then. But when you think about actually the conditions under which people had to work and the conditions under which people lived in the industrial towns of the 19th century, again, we maybe don't need to feel quite so complacent that, oh, that will be all right then. And that point about actually the effect on our rights, on our working standards, and our living conditions, and so on, is something I'll come back to, because I think that's really important. But I think we need to recognize, I think, that the way AI is being sold to individuals is, of course, that, oh, this is great, and this is the future, and you've got to get with it. The way it's being sold to organizations is very explicitly that this will enable you to shed people off your workforce. I mean, Microsoft Copilot, which is their kind of their sort of open AI using sort of generative AI, is priced for small to medium organizations on the basis that it's one person's job. And when you talk to Microsoft about licensing, they say, yeah, you can get rid of an admin person, because that's how they price it. It's about, for an organization of 100 people, it's about 30 grand a year. So they're very explicit about this. So the question is then, as Marxists, how should we understand this? So mainstream economists are talking about this as a crisis of underconsumption. So basically, their view is the problem that this causes for society and the economy is that if people, 47% of people are out of work because of AI, then they don't have very much money. Therefore, they can't buy stuff. Therefore, that hits the economy because there's not enough purchasing going on. So therefore, as far as mainstream economists are concerned, what we have to worry about is how we maintain demand if people aren't working. So this is sometimes people will use this as an argument for universal basic income. So that this is something that sort of proponents of universal basic income have kind of seized on AI as being seen. This is the argument that we were waiting for why we have to have UBI, because actually otherwise nobody will have any money to spend on consumer goods and the whole thing would just collapse. So this is a kind of a view in the mainstream that you can theoretically have a position where machines are basically doing all the work. I mean, sorry, kitty, stop gesturing. Machines are doing all the work, and we can just sit around and enjoy ourselves and spend the money that the government gives us to spend, and that'll keep everything going. I mean, there is of course a question about, as I think Kieran has very sensibly alluded to, that whether AI will ever be sufficient to do that. And I think you're absolutely right to be extremely skeptical about whether AI will ever be able to drive cars or drive tube trains, do various things. I mean, certainly it's again in the sort of tech sector, we're being sold AI on the basis that it's like having an 18-year-old intern. So if anyone who's had to supervise an 18-year-old intern is like, well, they're very well-meaning, but they're not necessarily all that much use. So, but leaving that aside, there is a major theoretical problem here, because thinking that you can actually have all productive work done by AI is not understanding where actually surplus value is generated within capitalism. As capitalist property, surplus value is generated because organizations pay people less than the value of their labor. So we as workers are being exploited because the value of our labor is less than what we're getting back for it. And you can exploit people because you can do that, but you can't exploit a machine. The value that you can get out of what a machine does is only the value that's gone into it. You can't exploit a machine. You can kick it when it doesn't work, you can treat it quite badly, but you can't exploit it. So that means that machine labor can't create surplus value. And this is a fundamental problem in capitalism, because as organizations, they get profits, they spend more of that profits on automation, on machinery, and so on. And that is then dead labor. So the proportion of dead labor in the economy goes up, and the rate of profit goes down. So this is what Marx identified as the fundamental problem with capitalism, and it's why capitalism lurches from crisis to crisis. So for individual capitalists, investing in the labor-saving devices and the machinery and so on is good for them, because it enables them to seize more of the surplus value that's circulating in the economy. They can get a bigger share of it than other organizations. That's why they do it. But they're not creating value themselves. So it's kind of a demonstration of how capitalism is sort of essentially predatory and parasitical. That actually the major capitalist organizations, major corporations, kind of are seizing surplus value from their competitors, and they're hoping to win on that basis, but they're not creating value in the economy as a whole. So basically, it is not possible to have a capitalist system that runs on AI. The system will just fall over before that point, and you'll have a massive crisis, and then no one will have any money to invest in any of this stuff. So that basically won't happen. And in fact, it's interesting actually with AI specifically, which I think Kieran also alluded to, that the sorts of jobs that are being talked about as being are under threat from AI are different types of jobs than have been under threat from previous rounds of automation. They aren't primarily jobs that are actually in production. They're kind of their ancillary jobs. They're jobs that are in sort of service sectors, this sort of thing. So these are roles that don't themselves produce surplus value. They help surplus value to be replaced elsewhere in the organization or elsewhere in the economy. And that's quite interesting because it is, I think, as Kieran said, it's doubtful whether many organizations will see the sorts of improvements in productivity as a result of it, of rolling out AI, which enables them to seize more of their, in a sense, their share of surplus value. In fact, I think Bloomberg did a survey quite recently where they said that companies generally aren't seeing this benefit from rolling out AI. So it's kind of, it's as I think Kieran said, there's huge question marks over whether actually this is going to deliver the kind of improvements in productivity that, like, say, the Industrial Revolution saw. So it's kind of, so I think both Kieran and I have kind of, been quite skeptical about why this is happening. So you might think that, yeah, this is just completely a bubble, and next year we're not gonna be talking about it at all. So I think it is worth, I think, spending a little bit, 5 minutes or so, yeah, thinking about, well, why are organizations that aren't the companies who have actually bet the house on developing this stuff, well, why is anyone even taking this seriously? I mean, I know quite, some organizations are kind of not wanting to spend money, but I know of organizations who have put a huge amount of money into rolling out generative AI for all of their staff and so on. So why is anyone bothering with this? I mean, partly it's because the capitalists don't understand their own system. I think, it's plausible that actually organizations don't necessarily realize that this is just going to accentuate the tendency of the rate of profit to decline, and therefore it is in general a bad idea. And there is definitely in tech, there's the kind of the CEO's golfing buddy said, oh, you should do this. So he comes back and says, I demand that we do this. Why haven't we done this already? So it's not necessarily rational, but there is an element of rationality, which is, I think, the disciplining effect that AI and the threat of AI has on labor. So basically, this is kind of an extension of what's called Taylorism, which is a theory of kind of employment, if you like, which is that you break down people's jobs into very discrete bits, which any fool could do. You take out all judgment, all autonomy, all ability to decide how you're going to do your job. You just make it so that basically you're making your employees like a machine. And then Taylor was 50s, I think, so 50s, 60s, something like that, maybe even 30s, long time ago anyway. And so this is before any sort of element of AI, but it's basically you make people like robots. And this is interesting because actually there are some examples where you have sort of chatbots and things which are pretending to be AI, and actually they're not. They're actually poorly paid people in parts of Southeast Asia are typing in the responses, pretending to be an AI. So it's kind of this whole sort of panoply of making people behave like robots at work. And I think the advantage to organizations and to managers is kind of obvious. It is much more control over employees than they have if you allow your employees more autonomy. And I think added to that is there's areas of AI which isn't the kind of the ChatGPT stuff that we've mostly been talking about and that is mostly talked about when people are thinking about AI. But there are loads of systems around employee surveillance, around recruitment, which are being used. I mean, these things are being rolled out and these features are appearing without an ability to turn it off in like recruitment systems. I know, because I've just had a huge argument about work about it, which will tell people who are recruiting, oh, this person isn't a positive person because, we've analyzed their body language in their interview. So we'll give them a low score, so you shouldn't employ them. I mean, the implications of this are obvious. So the implications, the threat of kind of, threat for bias and this sort of thing is obvious. But also, again, the kind of the disciplining that if you want to get a job, you have to teach yourself to use a positive body language that the AI will approve of. I mean, the mindset that creates then in the job seeker is really quite scary. So I think we can't, I don't think that we can afford to be complacent about this. I think we need to be very skeptical about AI, but I think we do need an organized labor response that isn't just, okay, no AI in no circumstances ever, because that's not a particularly realistic position. And there are some examples, like say in medical tech, for example, where it kind of sounds like, yeah, okay, that sounds like that might be quite a good idea there. But we have to be insisting that actually it should be the workers who are in control of how these things are rolled out. And that we have to recognize that the kind of a uncontrolled AI is a massive threat to us. And even if it's not actually rolled out in the organizations that we work for, the threat that AI will take our jobs, that AI will fundamentally change our jobs and remove any autonomy and be introducing, sort of controlling us, is a massive issue for Labour. And I think it is something that we have to organise against and that we have to take seriously. Thank you.